when I say there's bad news, it's not like anybody's health is in jeopardy here. But, I mean, there are some things that we're going to talk about today that you probably wish would go the other way, Purdue, the Pacers, etc. But here's the good news. It's kind of good news. Eddie, is it good news or bad news that Jimmy's off today?
Ooh. That's a good question, Jake. It goes back and forth. See, it's good for me because that means I get more mic time.
Well, look at you. So this is a sabotage on your behalf, right?
I don't know if it's a sabotage or not, but I'll take it as a sabotage if that's the way we want to frame it up.
No, obviously and understandably, Jimmy's simply taking time off with the newborn and the holidays and everything else. Going to be off today and Monday. So that's neutral news. How's that?
Yeah.
It's better for you, but, it interrupts flow of the show. But Jimmy Cook off today, so it is myself, that's Jake Query, and Eddie Garrison on this Friday. And, look, Purdue yesterday, last night was – I don't know that going in and losing that game, you would say, is necessarily – I mean, it's a disappointment. You want to see them win if you're a Purdue fan, but it was a little surprising. It's been a long time since we've seen Purdue get at times almost run out of a gym. But I think Penn State's pretty darn good. We'll get into that, though. The Pacers obviously have had their own struggles. Colts on a bye week. But here's the one piece of good news to lead things off. You tell me if I'm wrong in this, Eddie Garrison. We had Thanksgiving Day later this year than most years.
Yes.
So the window between Thanksgiving and Christmas shorter than most years, right? Like, literally the day after Thanksgiving, it was like, oh, wow, like we're in the holiday season. It got cold out. They lit the tree. There are snow flurries. And bada boom, like 2 days later, you're in December. And you're like, let's go.
Don't have to wait to say happy holidays.
That's right. We're already on the happy holiday train, right?
Eggnog is now
and by the way,
in full swing.
And by the way, nobody is denying you the right to say Merry Christmas. If you want to say Merry Christmas, say Merry Christmas. It's fine. If I see somebody I know is celebrating Christmas, I say Merry Christmas. If it's somebody that, I grew up in a high school that was like 30% Jewish, so oftentimes I just say Happy Holidays because it meant all-encompassing, whether you're celebrating Hanukkah. And to me, Happy Holidays is simply a broad stroke of Christmas and New Year's, right?
Yeah.
Instead of Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, I say Happy Holidays because it just means both. If you want to say Merry Christmas, that's cool. No problem with that. So long as you know the other person celebrates Christmas. That's all I'm saying. But I digress. So the good news is this. This week flew past, did it not? Gone. Here we are on a Friday. What are you smiling
It's always the...
You don't like my little sound effect?
Oh, no, I do.
So it is a Friday with the weekend upon us, and yes, we are not talking about the Colts. It's not a Blue Friday, but that's not to say that we don't have plenty to talk about. And let's begin with what took place last night in, I always get this messed up, but I'm going to be proud of myself for getting it right at this juncture. State College, Pennsylvania. It's been a mental hurdle of mine forever. Since before they were in the Big Ten, would always confuse State College, Pennsylvania with what college town, Eddie Garrison? I would always think to myself, no, wait a minute, which one is which? And it would always trip me up. Eddie's thinking hard. You can hear the process going on and the gears turning in the head. Do you have no answer?
No.
Anybody? Bueller? College Station, Texas, which is where Texas A&M is.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason, until really they were established in the Big Ten, I was always like, okay, Penn State, is that State College or College Station? Thus, just to make it easy, I would always say Happy Valley. Kind of like Happy Holidays. Just if you don't know, just boom, Happy Holidays, right? Happy Valley was not so happy last night for Purdue. But I don't know, in a weird way, kind of a compliment and something like a feather in the cap. Odd as that may sound. And Purdue did not, a couple of things they did not do well. First off, they did not take care of the basketball. That's first and foremost. You can't have the kind of turnovers. I mean, Trey Cuthman-Wren is a really good player and was a bell cow for them at times last night, but 7 turnovers. And, Braden Smith turning the ball over a couple of times, unusual.
Got into first half foul trouble.
Yeah, and they were – it's funny because yesterday Todd Meyer came in here, not the former Indiana player Todd Meyer, the executive producer Todd Meyer. And we were talking about the game going into it. Both teams coming in 7-1. Big Ten opener for both. Purdue ranked in the top 10. And he was like, that Penn State trip has always been tricky. Regardless of, and I'm not making excuses for Purdue, but regardless of what team you have, whether you're top-ranked Purdue, top-ranked Indiana, top-ranked Illinois, whoever it is in the Big Ten, there's just something about that Penn State trip. And I think part of it is like this psychological thing where you're thinking, it's a football school. They're not really a basketball power. But there's just something about whether it's the trip, the location, I don't know. It's always kind of a mental hurdle game. But Penn State's pretty good. Now, do we know how good? Because if you look at it, their only loss is to Clemson. Clemson's pretty decent, but it's also kind of the only real game they play. I mean, they beat Virginia Tech, okay? They beat Maryland, Baltimore County. Most people don't even remember that Maryland, Baltimore County has a program since they beat Virginia in the NCAA tournament. They beat Buffalo, okay? But I think Penn State's pretty darn good. But for Purdue, what they are, and I know that they know this. I mean, Purdue had a streak there of what, like 8 or 9 straight losses of court rush? The ultimate feather in the cap? The ultimate in terms of respect being given to you. So you knew that when Purdue comes in, they're ready to go. They're raring for it. You're going to get the better effort, especially considering where they were a year ago, the national runner-up. Yes, they don't have Zach Edey anymore. Yes, they don't have Mason Gillis anymore. But they still have core players, and Trey Kaufman-Renn has done a really nice job of being a low-post player that they can count on and build around. And you can tell that their offense does not lose a lot, not necessarily in production, but in the style in which they want to play, because you have your core pieces. But reality is, yesterday, Penn State just completely interrupted it. They just did. They forced turnovers. Penn State offensively got into groove. Purdue just never got going offensively. And they looked a little bit like what we've seen from the Pacers, where, and I say this a lot when you watch games, pretty elementary comment, but when you watch a team that's down 18, 20, 21 points, and you're like, enough, I'm not going to watch this, and you turn away. If you're in the situation I'm in, you lose control of the remote control, and now all of a sudden you're watching the Real Housewives of whatever county or some other like ship show or something. I don't know. And then finally you're like, can we go back to the game? And you go back 10 minutes later, like, oh, wow, whoa, okay, it's 5 points now. They got it within 7, whatever it might be. Oftentimes right there you can tell the ebb and a flow of a game, that it's about to extend back out a little bit because you have to exert so much energy to, in collapse time, make up that gap. You just run out of gas. And I think it's what happened to Purdue last night. So here they are now. Unusual for them, 0-1 in the Big Ten, starting out, with the loss right there off the top. Penn State beating them by 11. Did you watch the game at all, Eddie?
I watched some of it. I watched in and out of it. Olivia and I took up a new show a little bit yesterday.
Oh, and what show's that?
It is Pop Culture Jeopardy.
Oh. And this is on what?
It's on Amazon Prime.
And is it now Pop Culture Jeopardy? When they say pop culture, are they what era are they talking?
All eras. It's a wide variety.
Can you give me a sample question?
So last night they had like category about Friends, the TV show.
Answer, of course. Okay, go ahead. Friends I was not strong on Friends, but go ahead.
What they do it in terms of points, so it's not in terms of dollars because it's like a big tournament kind of deal to it. So this question was worth the most points. What was the name of? I guess it's not in question form, so sorry. Joey Tribbiani played a character in a soap opera as a doctor. What was the doctor's name?
Yeah, I would have no clue.
Dr. Drake Ramore.
Okay. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah. I was tuning in for like half of that.
Now, with Seinfeld on that, I'd be pretty solid.
Yeah. And then they had other ones. Like there was a math one that I thought was very difficult.
Math?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's like, okay, it would give you like the name of like the Matchbox 20, like somebody from Matchbox 20, and then another number or another.
Yeah, so like a name of somebody from Matchbox 20 and Maroon 5, and you got to say 25.
Yes.
Okay.
Like it would tell you plus or minus, and then you have to either do addition or subtraction. It was funny because the people there's 3 teams and they're in groups of 3. There's 3 people per team.
When did this show begin?
It just dropped earlier this week.
It just dropped, as the kids say. That's good.
Yeah.
And it's on the Amazon Prime?
Yes.
So I do have that.
Yeah. It takes place on the Alex Trebek stage, so it is in the same studio as the actual Jeopardy.
Now, is it live? It's not live, obviously, right?
No.
Because you said it's on Prime, so you can watch it at any time. Okay. And how did you fare? I mean, would you say, like, could you be a competitor on this?
No. I could not. Olivia, on the other hand, most definitely. Most definitely.
By the way, several people agreed it's College Station that you confused. That is correct. I mean, I ended up giving the answer, but that's correct. So I'm not alone here in my College Station State College confusion.
It's hosted by Colin Jost.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that guy's married to Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They did a nice – congratulations to them to get him out of the house.
I wouldn't leave the house if I were him.
Right? Am I right?
You're not
Saturday
wrong.
night to be the only time. No, that's the only time I'm leaving. You've got me from 10:30 until like midnight, and then I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Now, with that Saturday Night Live, one thing that happens to me, and we'll get back to sports, but this is along my state college station thing. I want to know if I'm the only person that this happens with. On Saturday evenings, I very rarely watch Saturday Night Live. And most people, when it comes to Saturday Night Live, are like, I haven't watched it since, and then insert the name of whoever the cast was between the ages of 14 to 19 in that person's life. And they're like, that's when it was the best. Well, no, That's when you were like at the age where it was the best, right? For you. For me, I would say like the prime years of SNL was, Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo and Tim Kazurinsky. And, other people obviously would say, you get into Mike Myers and Dana Carvey, and then obviously Will Ferrell. It's all relative. But on Saturday evenings when I'm home, which is at this point in my life almost every Saturday night at 11:30, I flip over to SNL for the sequence of the opening credits and music. Because when I hear the opening credits to music, and if I'm still awake at 1 a.m., I switch over for the concluding song, because it creates it's this very melancholic thing where it instantly takes me back to the end of the weekend of my childhood. Like it takes me back to either when I had like a babysitter as a kid and I knew that my parents were like going to be home shortly and so I had to go quickly get into bed, or in like high school, you were at somebody's house and you knew that basically it meant that you had like 30 minutes to get home and whatever else, and your night was winding down. There's this weird thing that happens to me, nostalgically speaking, that's almost bittersweet, but the one consistent and constant of my life about weekends whenever I hear the opening theme to Saturday Night Live. Now, Eddie, I will let you judge. Is that odd of me? There you go. Now this is the open, right?
Yeah, from 91.
Yep. I mean, it's still a very similar it's Saturday Night Live. Yeah, the saxophone, and then the end one is like depressing because you're like, it's all over. Tomorrow there's football games, and then 60 Minutes comes on, but once 60 Minutes hits, I mean, good Lord, I hear the clock, the tick of that, and it's like, it's the worst. It's dark outside now. Homework to do. Ugh.
That's how I felt.
Terrible. I'm telling you, like, I might just openly weep if you were to play the conclusion. Colts on a bye week, so that means you get to kick back, and if you're the Colts and you hear the Saturday Night Live closing music, you're like, hey, no worries, I can sleep in tomorrow. But there was football last night. Did you watch you said on Prime you were watching a new show. Does that mean that before that you were watching Prime Live and you saw the Green Bay Packers, who you predicted would win, and the Detroit Lions?
Yes, we were watching Pop Culture Jeopardy, and then we turned on the Packers-Lions game.
Here's my concern for the Detroit Lions.
Oh, boy. I think I know where you're going with this.
My concern for the Detroit Lions is this, and I'm going to hearken it. Is it harpen or hearken? I'm going to go back to an Indianapolis Colts lesson. There's no Colts team since they've been in Indianapolis, to me, that was more a shoo-in to win the Super Bowl than the one that got beat by Pittsburgh. That was, I think, a lot of people would tell you the one that lost to New Orleans was better, but I think that group that lost to Pittsburgh was the best team the Colts had. And I have mentioned on a gabillion occasions when, and it's a terrible, terrible reference point, I realize, but when I was in Tampa for the funeral of James Dungy, the Colts were 13-0 at that point, and I was there. I still remember the Idlewild Church was the name of the church, and the buses rolled in with the Colts, all of the personnel of the Colts, the entire roster. And obviously football was secondary at that point, but I remember thinking to myself, no one's going to beat these guys. And I'm not saying that was, but there was a solidarity on display there, not because of, I'm not saying that don't misunderstand what I'm talking about in the difference between life and football. But there just was, with that group, there was just this aura. And I'm like, these guys, when they get back onto the field, no one's going to beat them. Now, then they rested starters, and they lost in Seattle, and they had one other game that they lost. And then they beat, I think, Arizona to end the regular season. But they go into the postseason. They had the week off. They had the bye. And Pittsburgh comes in, and it was a foregone conclusion that they win that game. And as the game went on and as it was close, you find yourself thinking, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden it was like they didn't know how to react to it. Nobody knew how to react to it. What's going on before our very eyes? And they lose that game. Now, maybe Detroit is avoiding that a little bit because we saw, like, they've had a couple of, 2 weeks in a row now they played with fire. And they found a way to win close games. But I think there is a little bit of a danger in then just assuming when you go into the postseason, like, things just work themselves out. I know that I'm going to look up and we're down, but, like, we just end up winning these games. And when you play with that kind of fire and you hear the ice cracking underneath your feet when you're out in the middle of the pond, eventually it cracks and you're going to fall through. And I almost feel like and I'm not a fan of the Detroit Lions, but I think like most people, nobody's a Lions hater, right?
I don't think so. I think everyone wants to see them win because
it's like hating Santa Claus, never done it. Right? I mean, there's the only time in your life that you've ever thought of the Lions, they're kind of like this jolly, lovable character, right?
Like me.
Okay. And so, although the Lion mascot does have huge head. But
exactly, Jake. Exactly.
The Detroit Lions, I think most people are, if it cannot be your team, I think people are like, it would be cool to see the Lions do it. But it does feel like they're kind of playing with fire here. And a year ago, obviously, when they got into the NFC title game and then got beat, they had the taste. And you're like, okay, so now they've been there. Now they know. And they've done a really good job of carrying on that as opposed to, say, the Pacers, who got really close and now have struggled at maintaining. I know health has to play there. Maintaining that same level now that they're kind of the hunted as opposed to the hunter. But if I'm the Lions and I'm a Lions fan, I'm looking at it and I'm going, I don't want to lose. I mean, they've got one loss. You want home field, all of that stuff. But when you look at their remaining schedule, you're like, okay, now they go and they play Buffalo. Would it be bad for them if they lose to Buffalo?
I don't think it'd be bad. I personally think Dan Campbell is going to lose them a game.
Like, he's a riverboat gambler, man.
Like, I texted this to a couple of my friends last night.
Right?
If the college rule of one knee being down ended the play, they would have lost that game last night because Jared Goff get stepped on the handoff to Montgomery on that 4th and inches when they should have kicked the field goal, and he would have been down to it in turnover on downs.
They can afford. Here's the thing: they can afford a loss so long as they end the year with a win against Minnesota. Minnesota's only a loss behind them in the column, but now the other thing that comes into play is Philly, and I'm not sure who has that tiebreaker if they were to tie with Philly record-wise for home field.
Go by conference record,
and their that would probably be advantage Philadelphia because Detroit's losses would be
Buffalo. At that point, it would be Buffalo and Tampa.
So it'd be so they'd have one conference loss. Now, what's Philly's conference record?
6-2.
Okay, so they would tie there. Then it comes down to what, divisional record?
Well, they only have one loss against conference because Buffalo would be AFC.
You're right. Yeah, there you go.
So they would have to beat Minnesota.
They'd have to beat Minnesota,
regardless.
Yeah, so they can afford that one loss. I'm telling you, I don't know that it would be the worst thing ever for them.
Do the conference or division? One of the two.
Conference is the first.
Okay.
It's conference, then division, then head-to-head. I'm 99.9% certain on that. 99.9% certain on that. By the way, Ball State has a new football coach. We didn't talk about that a lot yesterday, right?
No.
As I was watching last night after Purdue, I was looking at scores. There is a coach right now in college basketball. That has kind of a Curt Cignetti type feel to him. There is a coach right now in Division I college basketball that I was looking at it, and actually somebody pointed this out to me, and then I did kind of a deep dive. And I think that we're going to see, and I'll get into this later in the show, I think Indiana might have opened some doors. I think Curt Cignetti might have opened some doors. And you're going to hear me talk about this later in the show, but there's a coach right now in college basketball that when we talked about undefeated teams and we were talking about teams that have gotten off to a good start, and you haven't gotten really into conference play, so it's really kind of difficult sometimes to tell. A lot of times you see teams get out to an 11-1 start, and then before you know it, the bottom falls out. But if you look at Drake right now is 8-0, right? Not much that you would say about Drake, right? Except for that Drake at 8-0 is led by a guy that did not necessarily come from the Division I ranks and won 81% of his games at a smaller level. They took a chance, and boom. Is it a Curt Cignetti type feel? Maybe Indiana football opened some doors to that in other areas. Ball State did the same. What's that?
It's his first year there at Drake because their coach went to West Virginia.
And so they tapped into Northwest Missouri State Division II or NAIA or one of those that won 81% of his games, and now here he is, right?
D2, very successful, yeah.
Now, Ball State is hoping to do the same because they, when they had a coaching opening, went right here within the state and brought along a guy that is familiar in Central Indiana, and he's going to be familiar with you folks because he's going to join us next. The new head football coach of the Ball State Cardinals. As a matter of fact, Eddie, I believe one thing we know is punctuality, right?
Right, he was ahead of schedule. He just wanted to check in to make sure it was the proper number.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So Mike Uremovich is going to join us on the other side. I want to remind you folks, by the way, from now until the end of the year, if you have a monthly car wash program sticker in your window, go to any participating Jiffy Lube, which is all of them in Central Indiana. Let the Jiffy Lube team member know you care about the looks on the outside of your car. They're going to say, then we're going to help you out with the underbody. $20 off a signature service oil change, free tire rotation, simply by pointing out that sticker when you go to Jiffy Lube, which is your one stop for all your vehicle maintenance needs, and you never need an appointment. The new man on the sidelines of Ball State football next. No, listen, my last name is Query, so I certainly understand the importance of getting people's last names correctly pronounced. And there are some names that some of them I like. I do auto racing, right? So there are some names that I just love. Santi Urrutia, right? It just rolls off the tongue for me. Other names, completely a mental block for me.
Santino Ferrucci,
another one. Zach Osterman always throws me off. Mike Uremovich of Ball State. I love saying Uremovich to the point where a lot of people would say Coach U. They'd just say Coach Mike, Coach Chirp. Not me. Mike Uremovich, Coach Uremovich. Joins us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, the new head man at Ball State. He was announced earlier this week, and he has a vast background throughout Central Indiana. Coach, how are you?
Doing great. I appreciate you saying my name the right way.
I'm going to say.
I told them before I got on, I listened to your show a decent amount. I'm surprised you got it. Good job.
Well, listen, I appreciate the fact that is your radio broken? Is that the issue here? That you've listened to the show, but and the confidence as well. Hey, let's begin with this. I'm going to ask kind of the simplistic question right away, and that is, going from, if somebody were to look at it and say, okay, so Ball State went locally here by finding, when I say locally, I mean a guy familiar with the region and the area, but you have a vast background throughout the Midwest in general. Your coaching tree, really excluding some time at Temple, has been really rooted in the Indiana, Illinois area. How big advantage is that for you right away to just kind of know the climate of what it is that you're going into?
I think it's a huge advantage, and it's something that really made me interested in the position, just to begin with, and just having the relationships with the high school coaches and being in the MAC conference 3 different times. There's some different coaches at those schools now, but knowing that you got to win games on a Tuesday night in November and how you got to build your football team to do that. And then the staff I'm bringing in are all guys that are from the Midwest that have recruited Indiana and Chicago and Ohio and Michigan. So they're going to hit the ground running because they've been recruiting it for 10, 15, 20 years.
How much of when you take over a new job, Coach, how much of the first priority becomes recruiting the guys that are already on the roster and letting them know that you're there and that you want to try to maintain as much of that as possible? How do you navigate through that?
That's what I said in our first team meeting the other day. Some guys get a head job, and the first thing they want to do is go recruit, and they're recruiting players at other schools or high schools. And the most important thing you got to do is recruit your roster and sell them on the vision of what you want to do with the program, how you see them fitting in that, and explain to them what your plans are so they understand what they're going to have to face moving forward. So the first thing we always start with is our roster, the guys that are already here, the guys that want to play football at Ball State. Now,
scheme-wise, Coach, when you go from Butler to Ball State, I mean, the assumption would be that you have a way that you want to play. You've seen, and I'm assuming that you have watched Ball State, so you know what the roster currently, the system that Mike knew was running. How different is it? How big a learning curve is it going to be, not only for you with the players that are there and that you're inheriting, but also for those players to know your style?
Yeah, it's always a challenge when you come in because if you've been there a few years, you've recruited to the things that you really like to do. But I've called plays for a long time, and it's really not as complicated as people make it. You got to get the ball to your best players. And so you come in when you're new and you evaluate the talent that's on the roster, and then you figure out how to get those guys the ball. And so our offense is going to be based on what we have. I mean, I'm not going to – it's like saying going to Army and saying you're going to throw the football because that's what you do. You're not going to be very successful. I mean, our offense is flexible enough to adapt to the guys that we have. And then, honestly, we'll recruit, and we like to play tight ends, so we'll go get some tight ends and, go from there. But you got to get the ball to your guys. So in terms of what you're going to do offensively, in our offense, whether I've been a coordinator or where I've been an offensive line coach at, we've had players go to the NFL from every position. We've had receivers go. We've had quarterbacks go. We've had tailbacks go. We've had a bunch of O-linemen. We've had tight ends. So if you're good enough to get the ball and we want to get it to you, we can find a way to do that.
Mike Uremovich is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. He is the new head football coach at Ball State. Your coaching background at Northern Illinois, Waynesburg, St. Francis, North Carolina State, so I failed to mention that, in Temple, and then Butler before now at Ball State. But you're an Indiana guy. You went to Purdue. You went to McCutcheon High School. I find this interesting. A lot of guys that you find, Coach, with that sort of a background were college players themselves. At Purdue, you were not. You did not play at Purdue. Take me through just kind of your career path of becoming a Division I college football coach.
Well, I did try at Purdue. They cut me from the team. So just so you know that.
But you know what? Here's the thing. Now, let's stop right there. I love that, and I'll tell you why. Because I think there are guys at the Division I level that assume the guy that they're playing for is most relatable to the stars of the Division I level. And that means that you can see a kid that has obstacles to overcome or has goals that they want to get to. You can relate to that. Do you sell that?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to coach from a young age, and when I was in high school, my high school head coach was a real good mentor to me. I give him crap all the time because he gave me some bad advice. I said I want to coach in college. He said you have to play Division I. So I went to Purdue and tried out and didn't make it. And then I get into coaching, and all these guys are played Division III, Division II, NAIA. So, but that was actually a great opportunity for me. But because I didn't get a chance to play there, I started coaching high school football. And I coached at McCutcheon for a couple of years and at Providence Catholic up in Chicago a couple of years. And that got me my foot in the door to the college football game. So, it's not easy when you didn't play, but, you got to earn everything you get. And so it's been a fun road for me to be on this journey to be the head coach here. And then there's been a lot of steps along the way that you mentioned, and I learned learned something at every place I've been. But, yeah, I can help our kids when they got things to overcome, or you can talk to your players about some of the challenges that I've had to face just making my way in this career.
Now, let me read you a couple of texts that I've gotten in the last just couple of minutes here, Coach, okay? First off, from What's Happening Todd, which is our buddy Todd that calls in, Todd Hall, huge Ball State, proud Ball State alum, okay? He says, Jake, all of Ball State Nation's excited. We're going to take the Fighting Cardinals to the national championship. Lead the chirps, Mike. Chirp, chirp. Nick also says, everybody at Ball State are extremely pumped. What about Ball State has you excited?
Well, they're all really excited because we're undefeated right now.
So, that's right.
What gets me excited is some of the things we talked about earlier. I mean, you're playing in the MAC conference, and we're located within 5 hours of some of the best high school football players in the country. So we can get to those kids and we can recruit them. And the way that recruiting works now, we're going to recruit them all because we're going to get a lot of them from the high school level coming in here. But then we're going to recruit all of them the right way. So when they do go somewhere else and they do get in the portal, they know that they were treated right by our staff, that we were honest with their parents, we were honest with their high school head coaches. And when it's time for them to think about somewhere else, we're going to be the first place they think about. We have great facilities here. I don't know if you've seen the indoor and all the stuff that we have here. We can build and develop a championship football team with what we have. And the community is going to support us, and they want to win. I've been here twice as a visiting coach. So I'm excited to be on the other sideline and have those fans behind us.
When you look at – and I want to touch on the portal real quick, Coach. I was talking, for example, I went last night or a couple of nights ago, I went to watch Marion playing basketball to see Pat Knight coach, and I was talking to Pat about it. And Pat was saying, look, and I realize NAIA basketball is not MAC football. Big difference. I get that. But he was saying if I've got a kid that I know has visions of playing beyond at a Marion, I have to recruit that kid with the understanding that he may go into the portal, but my selling point is going to be helping him better himself if he needs to go beyond here. Marion is different than Ball State. I get that. But how do you balance between knowing that there are some kids that you may have shorter time because of the portal and then also accentuating your roster using the portal? What's the balancing act there?
You talk like you said. I came from some small schools, so I mean the NAIA D3 Division I. The coaches are all going through the same thing right now, and our objective is to get the best players we can here, and we want to hold on to them for as long as we can. I realize if we bring in somebody and he starts for 2 years and he's an all-MAC football player, that the Big Ten schools are going to start reaching out to him, and then he's going to have to make a decision. And some of them are going to love it here so much they're going to stay. But I'm not naive enough to think that some of them aren't going to leave. So you have to have depth in your roster so when that happens, you're ready for the next guy to step up. So you've got to constantly develop your guys knowing that these guys can leave at any point. And that's just the world that we live in now. The college football community has created it. So you can sit around and complain about it, or you can find a way to work within the rules that are in place right now.
Coach, one of the things that I love about your league, and I would imagine it's one of the things that's going to keep you up at night about your league, and I'll say this with a lot of respect to Mike New, who you will be following now as the Ball State head coach. There's a very, very thin line between success and failure in the MAC, because I think it's a very balanced league and a very well-coached league. And unlike a lot of maybe even bigger Division I conferences, I don't think there's as big a disparity from the top of the league to the bottom of the league. So every single game you have a chance to really, catapult yourself or fall greatly there. How big a challenge is that of what I'm talking about?
And that's why I love it. I was talking with our president, President Mearns, about this last week, that's what really attracted me to Ball State, and that's what really attracts me to this conference. Everybody's budget's about the same. Everybody's got about the same stuff. And so you got to go out and perform as a coach, and you got to go out and get your guys ready to play. From the top to the bottom, from what facilities and money these schools have, it's about the same. I mean, you look at the Big Ten right now, and you look at the top half of the Big Ten, and you got Oregon, and you got Ohio State, and you look at the money and the stuff that they're spending compared to the bottom half of that league, it's not even close. It's not even close.
I'm going to give you, Coach, to wrap here, I'm going to give you the floor, okay? For the people listening right now that are maybe thinking, and I've been up, to answer your question, I've seen the facilities up there. I've been to home games at Ball State, I think 3 or 4 years in a row now. I've gone up for games, both in football and basketball. And so I want to give you the opportunity here. Sell our listening audience on why they need to get invested in Ball State football, whether it's because they're a young person that's thinking about playing there, or they're a fan that's thinking about going up and watching a game, or simply following them. The floor is yours. Tell me what Mike Uremovich loves about and is bringing to Ball State football.
You're going to have a tough, physical football team that's fun to watch on offense, plays great defense, wins in special teams, and does not beat themselves. We're not going to turn the ball over. We're going to hold on to the football, and we're going to win those games in the fourth quarter of the MAC that you're talking about. And they are exciting games to come watch, so come on out, because they all are close, and they all do come down to the end. For the kids that are looking to come in here, you're going to get to be a part of all of that. You're going to get a great education, get an opportunity to come out of here a better man than you got here, and be able to come back here 20, 15 years and have made a difference in a program. And that's why I took this job. That's why I like these opportunities like this, is to go into somewhere that hasn't been as successful as they want recently and make a change and watch the community and watch the fans and watch the kids get to experience winning. There's nothing better than that.
And led by a coach that once you get his last name down pat, you'll never forget how to say it, Mike Uremovich, the head coach of the Ball State Cardinals. Coach, I appreciate the time. I know it's absolutely a slammed period for you. So for you to carve out a couple of minutes for us, I greatly appreciate it. And chirp, chirp, we wish you the best of luck up there, all right?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys today.
I appreciate it. Mike Uremovich, the new head football coach of the Ball State Cardinals on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. I had mentioned, by the way, Eddie, Coach Uremovich, and I appreciate Ball State getting in touch with us yesterday to let us know about that. Other guests that you have lined up for today would include?
Kyle Neddenriep of the Indianapolis Star is at 1:30. Probably put a bow on the football season with state finals last weekend. 6 champions were crowned, and boys basketball officially underway last week as well. So we've got a lot of different things we can go with Mr. Neddenriep.
And when we come back,
Kevin Bowen at 2:00.
We were talking about with Mike Uremovich and just the college football landscape in general. You heard him talking about the portal, and we know what that meant for Indiana with Kurt Cignetti. But is there a blueprint there for college athletics in general that I thought about last night and we might see more of moving forward? We'll get into that, and I'll tell you what I'm talking about in greater detail on the other side on this Friday edition, Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Back into the conversation I was talking about coming up here top of the hour. Kyle Neddenriep at the bottom of the hour. Wanted to point this out, and I've been meaning to mention this for a while, and I've kind of gently insinuated it, but I guess now, got a couple of minutes to get more into it. It is very surreal to me, and I don't take it for granted by any stretch of the imagination, just to have been around the media scene in Indianapolis for a number of years. I am smart enough to know, and I mean this with 100% sincerity, I'm smart enough to know that I'm really only here because I had the fortune of being able to keep trying at it long enough, and then you get to a point where then you're just around, and so people are afraid to necessarily get rid of you. So there's a lot of luck that goes into it. And it doesn't seem like a long time to me, but then I think about it and I look at people who have had legitimate careers within broadcasting and arrived in this town, and this is not applicable to me, but arrived in this town in a different era. There was once a time, I mean this is no disrespect to the current era of television broadcasters, but I don't know that people realize this. In the mid-'80s to the early to mid-'90s, around the time that Indianapolis was going through its maturation as a sports city and evolving from the amateur sports capital of the world into a city that was hosting Final Fours and ultimately a Super Bowl and having a mainline NFL team and an NBA team that was nationally relevant and all of the things that, of course, the Indy 500. But during the time that the city of Indianapolis was coming of age as a sports city, it also was a period where, in order to be a broadcaster and a sportscaster in Indianapolis, and by that I mean your late local television sportscaster, Ed Sorensen, Mark Patrick, Dave Calabro, Will Hampton, a number of different people who did it, Ed Harding, who did it for a very long time in this town and were very, very good at it, Don Hine. To be the sports director, Dave First, at these stations, oftentimes it meant that Indianapolis was like your second or third stop in your career. You had spent, Ed Sorensen had come here by way of Tucson, Arizona. Before that, he was in New Bern, North Carolina. Don Hine had come here by way of, I know he went to northern Iowa and had been at a smaller market before he came here. And Dave Calabro had been in Dayton, Ohio. He, of course, an Indianapolis guy that went to Ben Davis, went to Butler, and was already rooted in Indianapolis. But it's not like he just, because his brother was a sportscaster, ended up working in Indianapolis. He cut his teeth and worked his way into WTHR, where he did not automatically get handed the keys as the sports director. He, again, earned his stripes and worked his way into the point now of being an absolute staple and a recognized synonymous name with sportscaster in Indianapolis. It is so incredibly rare that any sportscaster or broadcaster in general ever leaves on their own terms. Coaches don't often do it. Many professions, you get to a point where either there's an agreement for you to leave or you are simply called in one day and asked to bring your playbook. So the ultimate tip of the cap testament to a broadcaster is when they themselves are able to determine when their tenure is going to come to an end. And we are now within the last 2 weeks of that happening for Dave Calabro, who will be retiring 2 weeks, I believe, from today will be his last day at WTHR to finish out the year. He has already done his last Colts home game, but you're talking about somebody that was a broadcaster in Indianapolis and will, by the way, for those that have asked, and several have, will stay within his role of the public address at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But just in terms of being somebody that's on television and somebody that was co-hosting the Jim Harbaugh show and the Reggie Miller show and Sports Jam for years and Operation Football and all that went into it, there is, I would hope that people understand that regardless of which channel you watch, and there was a time in this town where if you watched Channel 6, you didn't watch 8. If you watched 8, you didn't watch 13. If you watched 13, you didn't watch 8 or 6. You didn't watch 59 once they hit the scene, and Hagan started cementing the same sort of a legacy. But it is so rare for people to be able to do that and do it long-term as a part of the community and a part of the fabric. There are people that have come through that were very talented and went on elsewhere. You know, Nicole Mansky, now Nicole Briscoe, Sage Steele, obviously. Those names come to mind as well. But to be able to stop and cement yourself, root yourself in the community and do it then to the legacy of being able to determine when your last day is the ultimate tip of the cap. And the Indianapolis sports community and sports media in general does owe a thank you to Dave Calabro, because he's done it with a smile on his face and done it as just simply a good dude and a professional one that really raised the bar for all of us in the market and in the community for a very long time. So as he enters in the last couple of weeks of his tenure, certainly hope that he's doing so while being able to take in all of the roses that have been planted throughout the time that he was at WTHR. We'll come back. Why Curt Cignetti might be changing the landscape of even college basketball. I'll get into that. Week, Eddie Garrison.
Yes.
So you don't want to admit it, but deep down you like this song, don't you?
I do. And on Fridays, I like to play catchy songs that are upbeat and send you off into the weekend in a good mood.
I'm cool with that. This sends me off into the weekend tonight going to Taylor University. And, I mentioned that song they used to play when I was at Taylor basketball camp when I was a kid. I'm looking forward to tonight. Matt Hiblin, who is our coworker and executive producer at our sister station, WIBC. Matt and I took high school radio and television together, known each other a long time. We are going up to Silent Night at Taylor.
So what you're saying is if I want to ever blackmail you, I need to get together with Matt Hiblin?
Correct. He can tell you about why I got suspended.
Or your wife.
For on-air
Emily
antics
Longnecker.
at WJEL. That's right. So my actual wife, Shannon, and I, can we say that now at this point, even though it's not legally binding?
Look, people always say, hey, you and your fiance, Olivia. I'm like, I don't correct them anymore. I mean,
right.
We're not technically engaged or married, but it's just like, you know what? At this point, we are.
Right? So Shannon and I were up, it was a year ago or so. We were at the Friendly Tavern up in Zionsville. Good place. And we're sitting there eating, and to my left, there's a guy that was wearing a hat with Alaska on it. And, of course, I started chatting with him, and it turns out he was a native of Alaska. So we're sitting there gabbing away, and really good guy. And he said, hey, I listen to the show sometimes and whatever else. And I said, well, I apologize. And he was telling me, and I found this fascinating, he's basically my age, and he has like a bucket list of 50 things that one should do after the age of 50. And one of them is to go to the Silent Night basketball game at Taylor University. And I said, oh, that's cool. Like I could probably, and of course I was dumb. I said, yeah, I could, I'm sure we can get tickets. I'll go with you. Well, I didn't realize that tickets are like, it's a thing. Like I had to set a timer on my phone basically and go online and buy them, get into basically a lottery to buy them. It was a whole thing. And Rick Johnston, who used to work at Taylor, ended up getting access because it was sold out by the time my computer got into it. It was already sold out. It was virtually impossible to get tickets for Silent Night, but I managed to get 3 of them. So Hiblin, Travis, and I are going to drive up tonight, and I look forward to it. And I saw Taylor play earlier this week when I went to Marion to watch Marion play because Pat Knight was coaching. And I'm looking at the Marion court, and it says John Grimes Court. And John Grimes was a coach at Marion. He's a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame for many, many years. Won over 500 games there. Old school guy. And it just got me thinking about coaches in general and what we've seen in Bloomington. Curt Cignetti, I think, has kind of turned college football and to a great extent, maybe even college athletics on their ear. And now you're staring at the floor and you're laughing again, Eddie. Can I ask what you're laughing about?
Oh, the YouTube chat. That's it. We're having a good time in there right now.
Dare I ask what's being said?
No.
Good or bad?
Oh, it's good. It's just all fun and games in there.
That's the YouTube break room, by the way, where people enjoy looking at me. And so, when I was in college, I was a diehard IU basketball fan. I think people know that. And I wrote a letter to the coach at the College of Charleston by the name of John Kress. Now, John Kress, that name isn't going to jump out to a lot of people. He's in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He had been an assistant in the NBA, actually in the ABA for the New York Nets. And then, he's a New York guy that eventually got the job at the College of Charleston in the late 70s. And he coached there for 20-plus years. The guy's record is unbelievable. I remember at the time when I wrote him, I was looking at him like, this guy, it's unbelievable what this guy's done. And at the time that I'd written the letter, he had won like 84% of his games and championships and the whole deal for College of Charleston, which had been in NAIA when he first started. And they were national champions there, and then they worked their way up and eventually became a D1 program. And I wrote him this letter and said, look, I'm a diehard Indiana basketball fan, and Bob Knight's going nowhere. We know this. But if Bob Knight were to ever retire, whoever would have guessed at that time that he was a handful of years away from being fired. But I said, I think you should be a guy that gets a look at Indiana University. And the dude actually wrote me back and was like, man, I'm very flattered by that. It's very, very flattering, but, I'm very happy where I am, whatever. And at that time, it was nothing more than a dumb college kid basketball fan reaching out to a coach with this pipe dream type scenario of, I wonder if this would work. And I'm not saying that what Indiana's done with Curt Cignetti is completely unprecedented, but what they did is, and Curt Cignetti was well on the radar. It's not like nobody knew who he was. I mean, he had been on game day with James. James Madison was really a thing there, the year before he came to Bloom, last year. I mean, they were very much in the mix. But I think there were people that thought, no. Like, when you are looking for a head coach, you've got to go and get a guy that is at a MAC program or a guy that's a coordinator at a Power 4 conference in football or basketball. But Indiana said, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to go a different route. And I'll give credit to Scott Dolson because I remember saying, and I could not have been more wrong, obviously, in hindsight. I remember saying at the time, look, the guy that's at Oregon State, I love what they're doing at Oregon State, and Oregon State's getting ready to get shut out of this conference realignment, reschedule, everything else. Indiana needs to go and get the guy from Oregon State. And then instead, he was hired by Michigan State, and I'm like, typical Indiana. They slept again, and they're going to end up with who knows what. They're going to overthink this, and they did not strike when the iron was hot. They didn't go out and get the guy they should have gotten. And obviously, I was wrong because then they turn around, and you hear Curt Cignetti as this late 11th hour name, and you're like, holy cow. And he ends up there, and what does he do? And this is the big thing, I think. He brought with him not only his staff, but also a lot of his roster. Joe Tiller did the same thing when he came from Wyoming to Purdue. But Joe Tiller was at least coming from a Division I, not a Power 4 conference, but a bigger conference. But that blueprint. So last night, I'm watching Purdue and Penn State. And I'm thinking about John Grimes Court, and I'm thinking about a conversation I had at the Marion game about college coaches in general. And I'm thinking about how we were discussing the teams that are unbeaten remaining in college basketball. Now, Eddie, you had come up with a list yesterday. You don't happen to have it still in front of you, do you?
I do.
There are 9 schools left. Of course, the last unbeaten in college basketball history is Indiana in 1976. If you live in Indiana, you probably know that. So those teams, and it used to be that you would go, pretty far into the year when you'd still have 8 or 10 unbeaten teams and maybe until late February before finally somebody would be the last to fall. But we're already now down to how many?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9, okay. And those 9 are, UC Irvine is 1. We know that Utah State is 1, correct?
Florida, Oregon, you did say UC Irvine, Drake, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Tennessee, the Ramblers of Loyola Chicago, and the Aggies of Utah State.
Okay. So Drake has been a pretty good program of late. Out of the Moval, but they lost their coach last year. Darian DeVries leaves and goes to West Virginia. So Drake is looking for a coach, and they're like, you know what? Now, Drake is in, if I'm not mistaken, Des Moines, Iowa, right? That's where the university's located. Yes, I know it's called Des Moines, but if you ever go to Des Moines, call it Des Moines. It drives people crazy. So
you are correct.
They go out and they interview Ben McCallum. Now, that name means nothing to anybody, I realize. Coached at Northern Iowa Community College 25 years ago. Then got the head coaching job at Northwest Missouri, played at Northern Iowa Community College, and then played at Northwest Missouri State. Then began as a graduate assistant at Northwest Missouri State, followed by Emporia State. Now, the only thing I know about Emporia State is this. When I was in college, I had a buddy that was from Emporia, Kansas, and we were driving through Emporia, Kansas, and I saw the biggest house I've ever seen, and I said to Sean Hoog, who in the hell lives there in Emporia, Kansas? And he goes, oh, you remember when we were kids, those little plastic things that hung inside of the window of your car where you could put your can of Coke? Again, he goes, the guy that invented those lives there. Oh, okay. That's all I know about Emporia.
Want to know their mascot?
Emporia State?
Yeah.
Pittsburgh State's the Gorillas, right?
Sure.
Emporia State, give me the first letter of the mascot.
H.
The Huskers.
No, sir.
The Hounds.
No.
I don't know. What is it?
Hornets.
Bzz. Okay.
Look up Corky the Hornet. That's their mascot.
Corky the Hornet?
Yeah.
How dangerous is his stinger? He's Corky. I mean, really, be honest with you. You know what I mean?
He looks very devilish.
I would think the cork is where he hangs his hat at night, not where he, wonder what the name, where they got Corky. Anyway, so Ben McCollum was at Emporia State, and then he goes to Northwest Missouri State, and he spends 15 years there. 15 years at Northwest Missouri State, Division II. What's he do there? He wins 400 games, 82% of his games, 4 Division II national championships, and Drake says, let's do it. And right now, Drake is 8-0. Now, you could certainly make the argument that they're 8-0 because he inherited a team that Darian DeVries left him that is really good. Maybe that's the case. But I think that we're going to start to see more because of what we saw with Curt Cignetti. And in the transfer portal era, it is so easy, especially in the basketball standpoint, to get a couple of guys to come with you that know your system, that we are going to see more of this, I think, where there's just – and I also think that you're going to start seeing – so the interesting thing is when we started to think to ourselves that in Division I athletics, now that it's basically a pay-for-play system, that we are – in our mindset, we thought, okay, the Kansases, the Kentuckys, the Louisvilles, the North Carolinas – the UCLAs, the Auburns of the world are going to become basically a G League. And they're going to be, and eventually I do believe, quite frankly, and I don't mean imminently, but I do think that those schools that I just mentioned, and this is going to be more of a football thing, but the football brands that you always hear about, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, UCLA and USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. I think eventually there's probably 20 of them that are going to secede altogether from the NCAA and say we are just going to be basically a feeder minor league professional system. And we are going to be essentially the G League. And I think basketball could well do that the same. And we thought that meant that coaches were going to say, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. The Tony Bennett effect. I'm not going to deal with NIL. And I know there's a lot of Indiana fan base that wonders about when Brad Stevens could return. And I'm telling you, if Mike Woodson, if something happens and Woodson's gone and, Quinn Buckner's off the board of trustees next year, and how does that change things? And could Indiana make a coaching change? And if they do, are they going to call Brad Stevens? My friends tell me that Brad Stevens might be interested in coming back, and he may. I don't mean to Indiana. I just mean, but the NIL aspect and the recruiting aspect of college basketball, does that change the opinions of coaches in terms of what they want to do and where they want to go? And so our mindset was that those coaches were all going to be like Tony Bennett and go, I'm not doing this. But maybe some of them say, look, this is going to take me into basically a minor league system where more money involved, et cetera. And then you have programs that if they're not part of that upper echelon that is in that secession group, are there still to compete with basketball games with trying to run a program. And I'm not saying this is a dam on those big programs, but still going back to simply the X's and O's discipline of the game of basketball. And if that's the case, and if it's already too far gone and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube of the big-time programs already being the pay-for-play minor league system, essentially, then the remaining programs say to themselves, okay, now we know that the big-time money, the big-time players, the one-and-dones are already like off the table because they're all in the NCAAG with Kentucky and Kansas and Michigan and Indiana and Syracuse and, USC, whatever. So therefore, those programs that are on the outside of that are going to say, we're going to build a foundation based on coaches that are simply coaching basketball like in a more pure sense. And that's rooted, I think, in the Division II or the smaller school level. And when you get a guy like that, if you see all of a sudden, and I don't know what's going to happen with Drake. I'm just using this as an example. But as I'm looking at Ben McCollum, I'm going, okay, if this guy has success and Drake all of a sudden becomes this year's Wichita State of a couple of years ago, or this year's Butler or Brad Stevens. If Ben McCollum has that kind of success and people go, well, they were able to see that because he flat out won at the Division II level. Look at Josh Schertz and what he did at Indiana State in a year. And when he was hired, when Josh Schertz was hired, people are like, what? Who is this guy? Where'd he come from? Some community college somewhere in a strip mall somewhere? But he won like 85% of his games. And then he comes to Indiana State, and before you know it, people are packing Hinkle Fieldhouse not to watch Butler, but to watch Indiana State taking on Seton Hall in the NIT title game. And everybody in the state of Indiana is like, these guys are unbelievable. And he gets hired and goes to St. Louis. I'm telling you, I think the blueprint's out there. And I'm not saying that Indiana is the one that designed the blueprint, but I think that what they've done with Curt Cignetti is right now an anomaly story, but I don't know that it's going to be as anomaly moving forward because of the separation here between the haves and the have-nots. That separation is only going to get bigger. It is. I mean, it's just only going to get bigger. Like if you are, I mean, Indiana right now has got $5 million in payroll on their roster. Think about that. Indiana University's got $5 million roughly. I mean, don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty certain that's pretty close because you got a little over $1 million in your center alone, right? So in that case, you're going to get to a point if you're a program and you're going to go, the way for us to win is either to just, and with the NIL stuff and the collectives, how many times can you go to the same alumni base and ask them to contribute? Indiana right now is light in head and shoulders, light years above everybody else in terms of the money that they're able to appropriate. But you got to have results for it. So if they're able to come up with $3 to $5 million for their roster this year when they turned over their roster, and kudos to Indiana for turning over a roster from a year ago to quote-unquote run it back. But if, let's say, Ballo leaves and then, let's say that Rice decides he's going to transfer again, you got to go back into the portal and you got to get more players, and you go back to the same alumni that are contributing and you go, hey, would you like to make a contribution again to the NIL? At some point, Eddie, people are going to be like, look, how many times are we doing this?
Uh-huh. Exactly, Jake. That's what it comes down to.
Now, that sounded sarcastic.
No, not at all. There's no sarcasm in that. Like, when I see comments about Trey Galloway up into the wee hours of the morning in the Bahamas playing blackjack, and they're like, he's a college kid, let him live his life.
I don't know. Do we know for certain that's him?
There was a picture.
I know, but then there's dispute
and then
about.
There was another picture that matches the same exact clothing all the way down to the shoes.
But there are also people that are like, that picture's from like Las Vegas. And
okay,
I'm just saying, to be fair.
Yeah,
yes,
it could be.
I get it.
Anyway, if that's true, and they're like, hey, he's a college kid, let him live his life. No, that has totally changed now with NIL. These guys are being paid to play, and they are being paid and treated like they are professional athletes because they're getting compensated to play. And if they can't be held to the standard of that, then Indiana should probably make a change. Because there is no alumni, fan, whomever is going to want to pay money if the players aren't being held accountable.
I mean, that's true. And if they're not winning. I mean, and we don't know. Look, we don't know what's going to happen with Indiana over the course of the year. I mean, Indiana may have a great season still. Maybe those two games were an anomaly. I would like to think that Indiana learns how to play in transition. But what did we see last night from Purdue? And I love the way Matt Painter does it. I do. Matt Painter so far, and Purdue gets a ton of credit in this regard, a ton. Yeah, did Purdue get beat last night? Yeah. You know why Purdue got beat last night? Because they turned the ball over. You know another reason Purdue got beat last night? Because Penn State was amped and jacked up to play Purdue because they are the creme de la creme, gold standard right now in the Big Ten. They rushed the court. The ultimate compliment, right? But the way that Matt Painter's done it is, this is a system I have. You're going to play this system, and if you don't want to play this system, then you can go elsewhere. And we've seen not once but twice in the last 6 years, 7 years, gold standard recruits that during the recruiting process with Purdue gave off a red flag that they wanted more about image, likeness, and name other than gold, black, Purdue, Pete, and Purdue. And so Matt Painter said, okay, that's fine. We have a system. We have guys that we know want to play that system, and that system works. And you got to give a lot of credit to Purdue for that. Indiana obviously is going more with the, like, let me revamp the roster this year, and they've gotten good players. And if they maybe because Indiana is not right now going with a system rooted in solidarity and continuity from one year to the next, you're having to find and feel yourself out over the course of the season. It takes you longer to know who you are, and what we know right now is who they are as of right now in December is a team that has no clue how to play in transition and got run off the floor in the Bahamas. That's not to say they can't turn it around. And if they do, and they catch lightning in a bottle, and they have a really good season through the Big Ten, get a good seed in the tournament, and make a little bit of noise in the tournament, then it's easier to go back to people and say, okay, let's run it back again with this same format. But you got to keep doing it every year, and you kind of start living paycheck to paycheck.
Kind of like what John Fanta said earlier this week. What is Indiana's identity?
Correct.
What is their brand of basketball? They don't have one. From season to season, it's different with Mike Woodson.
By the way, I didn't know this, and I wish I'd have known this when we had John Fanta on.
Big Red Panda fan.
Correct.
Big Red Panda
So
fan.
Red Panda, for those that are unfamiliar, is the woman that comes out and rides a unicycle that's like 20 feet high, and then while riding the unicycle puts cereal bowls on her foot and flips them onto her head and stacks them. Now, what I'd like to know more than anything else, above all else, when it comes to these halftime shows, between that or the guy that comes out and balances like a kitchen table on his forehead, or I recently saw what there's always some jackass that comes out with like a skateboard that balances on a bowling ball and he rides it back and forth and then twirls like a puppy on a totem pole. How much alcohol is involved for these people to find out they have this skill? That's what I want to know. Like,
excellent question.
Where did Red Panda one day just to say, you know what, like riding a unicycle's fun, but I wonder if I do one that's 30 feet in the air if I can flip bowls onto my head. Like, where does somebody come up with that? Is she eating just before bed? Like, what's going on there? Is she waking up in the middle of the night and watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory like me, and then all of a sudden, like, yeah, thank you, Eddie. Thank you. It took me 3 days to get that out of my head. But John Fanta apparently is like a roadie for Red Panda. John Fanta, who's been on this show and is Mr. Electric when it comes to talking college basketball in the Big East, and I think is the best guest that we have. But he apparently goes with Red Panda at some of these games and is on the sideline, and he's like the official bowl flipper.
December 28th, St. John's.
He's going to be the assistant, right?
That's right.
Do you think he has that on his resume? Is that on his LinkedIn, which is just, as we know, is just tender for businesses?
Do you think Red Panda has John Fanta on speed dial whenever Red Panda is doing college venues?
Train! Lane train. Yes.
I'm ticked.
John Fanta, when the Cleveland Browns lose, makes up for it by being able to just toss a couple of cereal bowls up to Red Panda. It was a big weekend last weekend in high school football. That means now that we switch things to the high school basketball side of things, and Kyle Neddenriep at the Indianapolis Star is going to join us next to talk about exactly that. little halfway past 1 o'clock. In Indianapolis, for that matter, it's a little halfway past 1 o'clock everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice that you hear on this program. Jimmy Cook off today and Monday, back with us on Tuesday. It is, and you know why, Eddie, you know why Jimmy's off today and off on Monday. Because we at the company do allow holiday pay. That's the kind of people that we are. Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't aware of this.
Well, you're the CEO. You should know these things.
That's why I was not aware of it.
Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so, knowing of that philanthropic nature of the company, is Kyle Neddenriep from the Indianapolis Star. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Kyle, I'll begin with football because we just got done with crowning state champions a week ago. Doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it was last weekend when 6 different state champions were crowned. So I'll lead with kind of the question that I asked you going into the weekend. Now that you look back on it, what do you look at as, of the teams that won it, the one that is probably just top to bottom the best story from beginning to end?
Well, I mean, the way Decatur Central ended it, and honestly, I ended up writing about, Dennis Sherritt, who lost his wife earlier in the week, the offensive line coach for Decatur Central, and didn't really know. I knew a little bit of the background. Didn't know if I'd be able to talk to Dennis, after the game or what the situation would be. He was up in a box watching the game, and then came down and coached as the game went along, and just such a emotional story, and just as the coaches and players all came up to him and were hugging him, and both of his daughters, his teenage daughters, were down there on the field. I mean, it's hard to top, let alone the Decatur Central's first state championship after a couple of close calls of getting there and not winning. And even Kyle Enright's own story of, his dad having won a state championship in 1981. And, he was pretty emotional, too, for that fact of, his dad wasn't able to be there, unfortunately. But just everything, I think, kind of that felt like the most emotional story of the weekend. That was the last game of the whole season, too. So kind of a capper to a fun weekend, and great crowds. Even on the losing side of that 5A game, I mean, Warsaw brought their whole town and some, I think, and you kind of figured that they would first time being there. But yeah, I mean, there's all the games. And the 6A game was incredible on Friday. The crowd was great, and Brownsburg and Westfield put on a great show. But that Saturday night felt, if you were down there on the field, man, it was really emotional, and I thought Dennis, the things that he said were really on the mark, and you could tell it was really heartfelt. What he was feeling from that Decatur Central community Saturday night.
And I read the article, Kyle, but for those that are unfamiliar, his wife had a seizure, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
And I don't, at the time that, and if you wrote this, I apologize. I know it's a sensitive subject. I don't know that, and it's obviously not necessarily totally relevant, although I guess people would be curious as to, she had not been ill, correct?
No, she hadn't. Her name Leanna, and she was a big part of a lot of the things that they did as a program. And she was at a grocery store Monday, and then had a seizure, went into a cardiac arrest situation, actually in the ambulance, and basically passed away on the following day. So all of it very. What's the word? Just surprising and out of nowhere, and just I mean, it goes without saying it's unfortunate, but that sounds like you're diminishing it, but just stunning, really, and adding everything into that was the week, you're getting ready to play for the state championship game, and everyone you talk to, will tell you that they're, super genuine people, and really are about, things that aren't just about themselves, and so just very, very sad situation. But and I got a nice, Dennis sent me a nice note about how much they felt from the community after and that how much that meant to him and his daughters, and I think that was an important part of everything happening there. But yeah, I mean she was not. Didn't have any, there was no real, that was kind of the sad part too, is there's no real, just knowing anything was wrong. So that's very scary, but sad, obviously too. And yeah, nothing leading up to that.
And I certainly understand Kyle. Kyle Neddenriep is our guest. And I don't mean this, I hope it doesn't come off this way, misogynistically at all. There were a lot of people that would probably say, gosh, how can you go on and coach a game while not knowing this particular circumstance? One of the things at the high school level, notably, that I've seen is, spouses of coaches, significant others of coaches, oftentimes themselves are just as big a part of the program. They're just as beloved by the kids. They're just as known. They're just as invested. And that's not to say that automatically we can assume that she would have said, no, go coach the game anyway. But it seems inherently across the board when it comes to that level of sports that does seem to be the case, man or woman, whenever there is somebody that's coaching, that the significant other, the domestic partner, whatever it might be, is often that invested where they would be encouraging of trying to finish the job, so to speak. And I don't mean that to belittle the tragedy of the situation. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I think you're spot on with that. And I felt like, I was looking at, had sort of looked through some of her social media, and it's very obvious, that she was, invested daily in Decatur Central, and what her husband did, and he said this too, but she was so supportive of him being able to do this, and she was just like a part of it too, and so I do think, and Dennis didn't intend to coach the game, he was planning just to be there. He wanted to be there. But as the first quarter got over, he was kind of compelled to be on the sideline. And I just, and who's to say, he shouldn't have. I felt like there was something, within him, like I need to be down there. I need to be. And he put a headset on, and he did. He kind of just, listened for a while and chimed in here and there. And he kind of jokingly said, yeah, I said run the ball a few times, like an offensive line coach you would expect. And but I think it just felt right for him to be on the sideline and make things as normal as possible. And he did get to speak to the team before the game as well, about an hour before the game started, and I know that meant a lot to him and the team. But just being down there, I think was the right thing for him to do. And I just felt like that was something he felt like he needed to do, and that's pretty much what he said. That night. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, I think being on the sideline was just felt more familiar and home to him than being up in a suite.
So, Kyle, now that we shift gears, Kyle Neddenriep, Indianapolis Star, our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Now that we shift gears to the basketball season, the storylines, and I know that basketball is well underway, don't get me wrong, but now that football is, over with, and we shift full attention to basketball, the biggest storylines or players not named, say, Braylon Mullins in the area would be what?
Well, I'm going to see two of them tonight. I'm curious how this Fishers Noblesville game, and it's at Noblesville, and if anybody who was there last year, that game, the sectional game, was one of those. And I've been lucky to cover a lot of great atmospheres and games, but walking into that sectional championship, 1 versus 2, and an hour before the game, and there's not a seat in the place, and people are just sitting there waiting, for the game to start. That was definitely a cool vibe, and I don't know if it'll be that tonight, but it'll be fun to see kind of how those teams look. I think Fishers, I had a chance to see them last week against Ben Davis, and they are loaded, and I think it will be real difficult to knock them off. Not to say they're going to go undefeated, but they're going to be a challenge. They've got a lot of pieces back from that team. So I think you start there, and I'm curious too how Noblesville looks. I think they lost a couple of key pieces from last year, but I think the guys that have coming back are good. Justin Curry and Barron Walker in that group, and I think they're going to be pretty tough too. So I think another team that out of our area, but down south is Jeffersonville, and they'll be a story of the season, in my opinion, with what they've got. And they already beat Cathedral last week, and they didn't have Trey Singleton, who's on the. I've heard he's on the. Won't be much longer, I don't think, before he comes back from his foot injury. But even without him, they beat Cathedral. So that's a big story, I think, going into the year, and how they look coming down the stretch here in a couple of months. But yeah, those are just kind of off the top of my head. I think Fishers and Jeffersonville certainly will be teams to watch. And then, obviously, you got the difference that one of the major storylines is Cathedral and Addicts moving down to 3A and also New Pal. So 3A is absolutely loaded. All three of those teams are loaded, and 3A is just going to be really tough this year under this new this new alignment that the IHSA has now. So that will be interesting too. And sometimes I forget that that's the case, just because we're so used to having them in 4A. But that'll change the tournament pretty significantly too.
Trey Singleton, Northwestern commit, correct?
Correct, yes.
A lot of good players in the area, no question about it, both throughout the state and central Indiana as well. And Kyle Neddenriep, who we'll talk to over the course of the hoop season, will be covering all of it. Kyle, I appreciate it, and certainly see. Now, here's the other question. I've been saying happy holidays to everybody now. Merry Christmas, whatever you want to say, because we're done with Thanksgiving and the state finals and the trees lit. Now, am I too early on that? Do I need to wait another week before that's couth?
I have a running joke with Matt Krieger and Clark Wade, and we'll say Happy New Year as long as possible after January. Like it could be March, April.
St. Patrick's Day. Happy New Year. Yeah.
Yep.
December 30th.
That's right.
Uncomfortable as possible.
All right. Well, Happy New Year to you. I guess we still have time to get that in from last year, right? But we'll talk to you soon, Kyle. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
Kyle Neddenriep, Indianapolis Star, Express Pro Tire and Auto Gas Line, Noblesville Fishers. Tonight, he will be up in Noblesville to discuss exactly that. Kevin Bowen, just over 16 minutes from now. Okay, Kevin Bowen going to join us just a couple minutes. The girls, we just had Kyle Neddenriep on. The girls' Marion County tournament is getting ready to get underway. Eddie, I want you to name a school for me that you believe is in the Marion County tournament, and I will give you a thumb up or thumb down, and we, of course, have the corresponding sound effects.
Okay.
See how quickly you can do this. There are 16 schools that are in the county tournament. Go ahead, go.
Lawrence Central, Lawrence North, Decatur Central, Plainfield. No, that's right.
Marion County.
Marion. I know. As soon as I said Plainfield, I was like, Eddie, you're an idiot. Mooresville. Nope.
No, Mooresville's, yeah.
I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. Let's see. Roncalli. How many is that? 4?
You are missing
North Central. Warren Central. Ben Davis is Wayne Township. Oh, okay.
Wayne Township's Marion County. That's correct.
That's right. Okay.
All of the township schools.
Okay, yeah.
So you're missing another township school. You're missing 3 township schools. 4 township schools.
Okay.
One is named for the township.
Marion? Or the township. Okay.
There are actually 2 remaining that are named for townships that you have not yet named. 3 that are named for townships, technically. 2 begin with the letter P.
Perry? Southport?
Okay. Ding, ding. Yep. Another that begins with a P on the northwest side of town.
Northwest?
It's also a kind of fish.
Oh, goodness.
The Red Devils.
Pike.
Southeast side of town. There's a township that's named after a guy that many people think was a president, but he was not, even though he was a founding father and used to fly kites.
Oh, my goodness.
He has fancy little glasses. Got a bad haircut. First name Ben.
Yeah, I know. Franklin?
Mm-hmm.
Which Franklin? That would be community, right? Or is it township? Township?
Franklin Central.
Oh, Central.
Franklin Central High School. Now, so the others that you're missing, by the way, Park Tudor, Lutheran, Brebeuf, and Speedway. But here's my question.
That made me feel like an idiot.
And I'll ask Kevin this because he went to Cathedral. I always felt like the county tournament, I mean, the city tournament features the IPS schools, and then I always thought it was the city tournament had Cathedral. And I always thought Roncalli was in the city tournament. So if Cathedral is a private parochial school, why are they in city, but Roncalli's in Roncalli and Lutheran and Park are in county?
It's a good question. Too bad Jimmy took the day off. We could ask him. He may know the answer to that.
I mean, I always thought Roncalli was in the city tournament. Maybe this graphic's incorrect. Because to me, the city tournament was always the county tournament was always just the public schools, all of the public schools, the township schools, and then the parochials were part of the city schools. See, this is kind of stuff that I probably should have researched ahead of time, right? But the graphic that I'm looking at lists those participants as the county tournament.
Kyle Neddenriep probably know that too.
He would, but I'm going to put the pressure on Kevin to know that since he's a Cathedral guy. Somebody will probably send me a disclaimer on what the difference is, right?
Probably.
Is Cecina, which one is Cecina? Is Cecina in the county or the city? I don't see Cecina is listed. Oh, Beech Grove we forgot about too. In the county.
Oh, yeah. Bzzz.
Also the Hornets. Kevin Bowen with that extremely smooth recognition of the disparity between the schools is going to join us next. But we'll primarily talk about the fact Colts on a bye week, but what are we looking for? That with Kevin next. Okay, so we'll ask Kevin the Cathedral question right off the top before we get into the Colts. Kevin Bowen joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. You hear him in the mornings with Andy Sweeney, the wake-up call with KB and Andy. Kevin, I realize that I'm putting on my old man hat here, but with the county tournament getting underway shortly for girls basketball, and Roncalli and I believe Lutheran are in the county tournament, Cathedral is in the city tournament. I was always under the impression that all of the parochials were part of the city tournament and the township schools and smaller public schools within Marion County were part of the county tournament. Do you know when that changed, when there was because Ritter, I think, is in the city tournament, correct?
Yeah, I've always, ever since I was in high school, Roncalli was county. Well, was a county school. Is it not, and I could be dead wrong on this, is it not inside of 465, you're a city school, outside of 465, you're in the county?
I would just not to be a moron here, I just assumed county in general, but I guess Roncalli is south of 465, correct? But isn't so too Franklin Central?
Right, and North Central, I guess, is technically south of 465, right? So, and they're obviously a county school. I don't know. Maybe I need to look at a specific map how it was explained. But ever since I was in high school, city was always, I guess if you want to call it from a parochial standpoint, Cathedral, Chittard, Heritage Christian was a city school. Ritter was a city school. I believe Cecina was a city school. Obviously, you had your IPS schools, and I feel like that was the exact – I don't think Lutheran was. I don't think Roncalli was. So,
but it's interesting because Park Tudor is a county school, right? But it's inside 465.
Yeah. So, I'm dead wrong on that.
You think they had a draft? They have a lottery, right?
Did we ever do – now, obviously, we did this back in the 90s, those early years of class basketball. What was it, the Tournament of Champions, right?
Correct.
Did we ever do – city winner plays the county winner?
I know that's a good question because that's a huge deal in New York City. In New York City, they used to have the city schools versus like the parochials, a parochial all-star team taking on like the public school all-star team at Rucker Park. It was a huge deal, right? So,
and not to turn this into like a high school discussion, the other thing I've always been fascinated by in Indianapolis, and it always hasn't been the case, but it has been for the last X amount of years. Cincinnati and Louisville and St. Louis, for example, they have many all boys and all girls high schools.
Correct.
For the last 30 some years, we don't have that, and I just kind of find that interesting. I think we're familiar with the Cincinnati schools because our football schools play a lot of those football schools in the Moeller and the Elder and the St. X and those sorts of schools, but they have a ton of. One of my wife's cousins, actually, their boys go to St. X. Their girl's about to be in high school, and they were talking about, she'll go to one of the 5 all-girls schools. And I'm like, man, that is just that's so foreign to us.
But obviously, at one time, Cathedral was that way, right?
Right. From a modern sense.
Right.
Ever since really you've gone to high school, and certainly I've gone to high school, that's how it's been. So. Yeah, that's kind of another wrinkle along with, whatever. You need to see the football tournament and all of our other, rich high school discussions that we could have.
That's right. Kevin, let's get to the Colts. Obviously the bye week, and I think we know this. A lot of times we kind of started the week off talking about this. To me, if you were to, I'll begin with asking you this. If you were to give NFL teams, let's say that by – having a great season in the National Football League, the reward is the next year you get first dibs to select your bye week. Do you think teams would select beginning of the bye season for their bye week, or would they select where the Colts have it now?
I think they would prefer mid to later. I think right around – I think in an ideal world, you would have like a week 6 or 7 Thursday night game, and then like a week 11 or 12 bye. I think that's, the Colts, and I believe there's 6 teams on a bye this week, which is a big amount, and it's the last bye of anybody in the NFL. I want to say all of the other teams on the bye this week have had a Thursday night game at some point this season. So the Colts haven't even had the mini bye. I think you talk to some NFL players, obviously playing on Thursday night is a grind. There's no denying that. But boy, that weekend off is so welcomed, once you do get to that point. So So yeah, I would think kind of mid to late, November-ish, mid-November maybe, especially if you could put that Thursday night game like early October. I think in an ideal world, that's how coaches and players would want it.
So what did the week look like for the Colts, just in terms of, for our listeners who are obviously not over at the Colts complex on a regular basis and seeing what a week looks like? Give me what a typical week looks like for them in terms of their schedule, and then what the actual bye week, kind of when it begins and then when they resume back to normal.
Yeah, so technically players have the whole week off. I know you guys talked to Danny Pinter. We talked to Mo Alley Cox on Monday. I think both of those guys went into the facility for some sort of treatment and just, maybe a brief film session on their own on Monday. And then after that, they got away. And I would assume a lot of them got, out of town. They are not due back until, I believe, Monday. So the full kind of week off. I think in the different iterations of the NFL in the last 10 to 15 years, sometimes you practice multiple days during your bye week, and the time off was only like maybe a 3 to 4 day sort of window. Coaches-wise, they were in there Monday and Tuesday, and I want to say that was it. And then they got some time off. Obviously, they're so psychotic they probably couldn't completely get away, and then you obviously know what's waiting when you come back. And Denver's in the same boat. Both Indianapolis and Denver had the same bye week. So, yeah, I mean, for players, it's typically, you're in there in some capacity Monday for sure. Tuesday's typically an off day, and then Wednesday through Friday you practice, and you board a plane on Saturday, and you go somewhere and play a game. So it is a much, much different look than, what a normal week would be like.
Strangely, Kevin, for the bye coming this late into the year, when you look like when the schedule came out and I looked at it, I went, well, that's good because that's going to give them a chance to really get healthy and ready for the final push. You tell me if I'm off base here. Considering how late in the year it is, for the most part, they're about as healthy as you can expect. I mean, I know that they've had some guys that that are on IR, but in terms of those that are available, their health is really pretty good considering where we are in the season. Am I accurate in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, when they come back from their bye week, it's possible to have, would it be all 11? No, Will Fries, I guess, is on injured reserve. You'd have 10 of your 11 offensive starters possibly back in the lineup from what you thought week one. And then defensively, no Juju Brents, no Samson Ebukam. Unless I'm totally forgetting somebody, and I easily could be. I mean, 19 of 22 starters in mid-December. Hell, talk to the Detroit Lions about that, with how banged up they are, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, yeah, I would agree. And, sure, there's points in the season, Jake, bye week-wise, that, like, right now it obviously is helping a guy like Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs would have been very iffy to play on Sunday had the Colts had a game right now. Different parts of the season, you could have used the bye week for Anthony Richardson and the oblique. You could have used it for Jonathan Taylor and his ankle, DeForest Buckner and his ankle. There's certainly times where, it could have been beneficial, but all in all, I don't know, maybe there's some stats that indicate otherwise. I feel like the Colts have had a decently healthy year when you probably compare them either to past Colts teams or even to some teams around the NFL.
If you look at the remaining schedule, Kevin Bowen, our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, at Denver, obviously, is a big one. We're going to get to that. Then Tennessee at the Giants and the Jags. Okay, so, I mean, there's no reason to think that they would not win and, couldn't and shouldn't win those last 3 games. Kevin, it really feels like it comes down to this. I mean, this feels like the ultimate play-in game, if you will, if this is the college football playoff rankings between Indianapolis and Denver. Agreed?
Yeah, it's probably a good way to put it. I mean, about as close as you can get to a play-in Week 15. Obviously there's still 3 games left for both teams, like you said. But the Colts, I think, got the easiest schedule the rest of the way. And I forget about Denver. I want to say Denver is one of the hardest. They've got Chargers, Bengals, and Chiefs, and assuming the Chiefs are still playing for home field in Week 18. I share the numbers, and I know numbers can be a little complicating on our show this morning. But basically, with a win right now, I think your playoff chances would rise to like 55, 60%, and with a loss, it would go to like 70%. So I mean, just when you hear those numbers, like
70%, you're not in. You're saying
7% chance you.
Oh, 7%. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you said 70. Okay, yeah.
No, if you lose, 7% chance you get in the playoffs. If you win, it's like 55, 60. Now, you still need help even with a win. I think that is something to probably reiterate the and we could debate, the phrase of, do you control your own destiny? I mean, technically they don't, because Denver is at 8-5 and you're at 6-7. So even with a win, you would still need one more Denver loss. But you just rattled off the Colts' final 3 games, and I just rattled off Denver's final 3. You would think there is one more Denver loss in that. And if you're a Colts fan, you really hope there's not a loss to Will Levis, Drew Lock, or Mac Jones in there for your football team. So even at 55-60% number, yes, you need another Denver loss, but boy, it just seems like that's almost inevitable for them. They've got the Chargers, I want to say, on a Thursday night right after they play Indy, so they'll have a short week there coming out of the bye week here. So, yeah, this is just it's a monumental, massive, repeat all those words 100 times, week 15 game.
Who would you say grew more in the last 6 weeks? Anthony Richardson because of Shane Steichen, or Shane Steichen because he had to awaken Anthony Richardson?
That's a great question. I mean, the cop-out would be both to some levels. I also think the other area that Shane Steichen probably grew in, and I thought actually Dan Campbell had a great quote a few weeks ago, when the Lions played the Colts, that was right after the Jets game, if I'm not mistaken. So Richardson, probably his best game as a pro. And Campbell mentioned, watching Richardson on film from the Jets game versus all his other films, it was like the handcuffs were taken off of him. I've heard people use the golf cart reference to the governor was taken out. And I think that's a good way to describe it. They obviously are running him a lot more, design runs early in games. So I think Shane Steichen's also grown in that area. And certainly Richardson, from a detail standpoint, and you bring up the weekly schedule and those sorts of things, I do think there is, just more of an intensified commitment to, what all goes into Monday through Saturday. So, yeah, the cop-out is probably both. They play into each other, certainly. And I mean, I will also add this. Who knows how often we'll continue to say this, but Joe Flacco being bad at quarterback for 2 straight weeks was monumental in saving the season. I mean, monumental in getting Flacco to the bench and getting Richardson back in the lineup.
Yeah, because, Kevin, that was as big a factor in switching back as anything, right? The fact that they're like, look, we can't – how are we going to sell this to anybody, in notably the locker room, right?
Correct. Spot on with all that. And remember, they committed to Flacco the Monday after all the games run together at this point. Whatever it was after, was it Bills maybe, when Flacco threw all the early interceptions? They still committed to Flacco that day after. Shane did it publicly. And then went back on it, Tuesday. He made that announcement, Wednesday to the media. So, yes, I guess it sounds bad to say, but, when you went around the table for Thanksgiving and said things you're thankful for, be thankful for Joe Flacco showing his age at quarterback for those 2 weeks. Because if he was not as bad as he was and you did not lose those 2 games, I think we still could be talking about Anthony Richardson on the bench. And maybe he would return post-bye week. But I think that's very, very possible that would have been still happening.
I remember, Kevin, if you recall, when Kerry Collins came in, and there were a lot of us, myself included, when Peyton Manning went down, and it was like, well, Kerry Collins, he'll be able to win them 9 games, and he went out, and in week 1, it was like, oh my gosh, this guy's still on his porch playing a guitar, right? And I don't remember if they released him or if he was around, but I mean, he was just persona non grata. What is Joe Flacco's place in the franchise right now?
Well, you would remember this better than I, but Collins was signed just a couple weeks before the start of the season, right?
Correct, that's right.
Like he was Flacco. Flacco was signed in March, I guess. So,
yeah, that's correct.
He did spend the whole off season, and then did he get concussed? Was that what it was? I don't know. I felt like there was something that maybe led to Painter.
Yeah,
going in there.
He was concussed, and he was quote unquote questionable for 3 or 4 games, and then just kind of never heard from him again. And then he retired. Went back into retirement eventually.
So I guess there's probably a little bit more. Certainly, there's more. I assume there's more financial commitment to Flacco in what you gave him from a contract. But Flacco is also a free agent, so I guess standing within the locker room, it played out differently in that I don't think Collins was ever the backup the rest of the year. I assume
that's what I mean. But so what I'm getting at is Flacco actively? I mean, I know he's on the roster and he's around, but is he the guy that's sitting there watching meetings? You think, and then watching with Anthony Richardson, going, "Hey, let's go over this," and I noticed this and noticed that, or is he just kind of hey, you know what? You need me, call me?
Probably more the latter. Yeah, I don't think he's going out of his way. Actually, I think a guy that's been really important to Anthony Richardson has been Sam Ehlinger. And I think that's just kind of how Ehlinger is wired. That's a little bit more in his DNA. And a sixth-round pick who probably knows his role in the NFL is different than Joe Flacco being a first-round pick and has always been a starter, really, until, these last couple of seasons. So I do think Ehlinger has been, very diligent and to, process and work ethic and a lot of boring stuff to you and I, but a lot of stuff the Colts felt like, clearly Anthony Richardson needed. So I would argue Sam Ehlinger has probably been more of that, and Flacco is, I don't want to act like he's, beyond standoffish, but I think he's made it very clear from day one, I'm not here to do teacher-pupil thing.
A guy, Kevin, that I feel like they kind of don't, and this sounds weird to say, as things have really ramped up with Anthony Richardson's development and trying to, in part of that, making him comfortable by utilizing his legs. He's a wonderful talent, but is Jonathan Taylor almost too much a one-trick pony and one that is, oddly enough, if you're going to start using Richardson on design draws and things like that, is Taylor kind of an odd fit? Am I too critical?
I guess let me answer that with the question I threw to Shane Steichen last week. I asked Shane, are there running backs that are better out of the shotgun versus under center? Richardson is primarily an out-of-shotgun quarterback. If you watch Jonathan Taylor in college, if you watch Jonathan Taylor here in the NFL, it's been much more of, under center. Again, with Richardson, it's different. And, Shane didn't, commit to yes, but, he definitely felt like, running backs have strengths, and it's your job to kind of cater to that. So, that might be a little bit more of a complicated answer in regards to running back. I don't think Taylor's had many moments to show off his ability to get to that extra gear lately, but I also don't feel like when those moments have been there that he maybe has gotten to it. I thought I'm trying to think when he got back in the lineup. He's probably been back for, 6, 7, 8 weeks at this point, and I just haven't seen as much of that burst. And if you watch games, I want to say New England was one of them, he certainly has had games where he's gotten that ankle retaped and stayed in games here as of late. So, you talk about guys that, beneficial to the bye week, and again, maybe they don't show up on the injury report week in and week out. I would say he's one of them. So I still think just given his home run ability and given Richardson's home run ability, and if you want reasons for optimism when the Colts get back from their bye week, I still don't think the run game has gotten to certainly the elite level that I thought it was very capable of being at the start of the season with those two. And I thought the New England game was pretty good, but still, I'm waiting for the 30, 40-yarder from Richardson. I'm waiting for the 40, 50-yarder from Taylor. I still think that's possible.
I just think Taylor would be, and I know this is, getting really, really nitpicky because he's a wonderful talent. And we've seen, Taylor can put games away, no question about it. But for this particular offense and for what Richardson could use, and part of this to me, Kevin, is it would be offset if they had tight ends that could be reliable safety net, yard after catch guys for him. But because they don't, how beneficial it could be to have a back that he can throw a flare pass to out of the backfield and then turn that into plays if there's not going to be a tight end and that little soft area that he can get it to. And that's the one thing that just for this particular offense that if I was to nitpick, it would be nice to have a back more reliably that can do that.
Oh, there's no disagreement there. But, to be fair to Jonathan Taylor, Philadelphia takes Saquon Barkley off the field at times. Baltimore takes Derrick Henry off the field at times, and they get those guys on the field. I'd argue the Colts don't have that on their roster. It's not like, I think in today's NFL, sure, there are some backs that are very gifted and can play all three downs, but 80, 90% of the teams don't have that. So I think that is a need for next season. And not to get ahead of the draft, but I think they need to spend a middle-ish round pick on that type of running back, kind of more of the pass catcher out of the backfield. But, if you go back and you watch that two-point conversion play to win the game on Sunday, New England's been a linebacker on that play. He overruns it thinking that Taylor is getting it. Richardson faked it to Taylor and then kept it up the middle. And the reverse of that can easily happen with Richardson. You're going to get guys that are all of a sudden going to think, hey, wait a minute, I think the quarterback's going to, especially down at the goal line. Now the Colts have kind of said, hey, we will run Richardson and we will run him and we will run him in the goal line. Well, at some point, defense is going to overaccount for that, and then Taylor's going to be the beneficiary of that. So now I think you're just kind of waiting for that, and that's where some of the self-scout in the bye week comes into play of, you've showed all these Richardson runs to teams now. What are the wrinkles off of that? And I think that's where Shane Steichen will earn his money.
Was your son confused by not having to do a helmet pick this week?
Yeah, he was. I know. I was thinking, boy, that reminds me. I got the helmets right here. What color Broncos helmet do you think we got?
Boy, that's good. Now, if you're going with, the Broncos have a couple of variations here. If you go with the new, the newer variation, the navy one with the in motion Bronco head on the side, I would think that is going to lure his eye more than just the old school, the blue and the little D with the helmet with the Bronco in it. I would go probably with the newer variation. Which one are you going with?
Yeah, it's got this just screams Terrell Davis on it. Yeah, this just screams Bill Romanowski 100%. That's what we have here from a Broncos helmet standpoint. Yeah, I don't know how what animal he might confuse this for, but yeah, he's got to be picking the Broncos, you would think.
Well, we'll see. We got another week before we have to do it. Yes, Eddie?
Kevin, go ahead.
Could Jake, I know he said it several times, but I haven't caught it all. Jake, could you walk me through tonight? How big is the gym? Are you front and center? Do you sing after 10 points?
Okay.
Where are we at on all
Silent Night, the gym itself, gosh, it's been since I was a camper there that I think I've been in the gym, but it's basically the size of like a larger high school gym. I think 2,000 it seats.
Don't forget to take your trophy.
That's right. No, blue ribbon.
That's right.
First team Taylor all basketball camp. I'm using that along with as my pass. So as I understand it, Kevin, tonight's game between Taylor and Moody Bible, and we're hoping for a good mood. They are silent until the 10th point is scored. The students go crazy. They're all dressed up in pajamas and Teletubby outfits and whatever else, and they go bonkers for several minutes. Then they resume the game, and then it is after the game when they sing Silent Night.
I thought they sang mid-game.
I did too, and then I was a little bit disappointed to find out this means apparently I'm going to have to stay for the whole game. But no, I have 3 general admission tickets. The doors open at 5. The game tips at 6. We're going to get up there probably around 5:15 or 5:30. So wherever there's 3 seats, we're going to wedge our way in and sit there and sit silent until the 10th point, and then we'll go bonkers.
Man, cool. I must say, you sitting silent is something that I have dreamed of for years. So God bless those that are sitting around.
And I'm paying to do it.
Yes.
That's right.
Thank you, Upland, Indiana, for providing this opportunity.
Now, here's the other thing. Do you think I can get an Upland? Can I get an Upland beer at a Taylor game?
Oh, gosh, isn't it? It's got to be a super dry campus, right?
I would think, yes.
Well, Indiana's a dry campus.
It was when I was in basketball camp, but I was 10.
Nothing would be like, Jake Query's been kicked out for speaking Dragonfly here into the Taylor show.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you. So Pat Knight got ejected from a Marion game recently, and apparently the officials told him, they're like, hey, in terms of some of the language, you got to be careful when you go to Grace. Just saying, right? It ain't Lamar.
Those environments are going to be yes, it is not Lamar is probably a very good way to put it.
Kevin, if Notre Dame and Indiana are playing in the college football playoff, are Max and Rosie Bowen's college fund going bye-bye and to make sure you're there?
Yes, I will. Yeah. I will try to do everything I can to be there. So, yeah, it'll probably be the 529 will have to be put on the back burner here for emphasis in the closing out the 2024 year. But I don't know. I'm hoping tickets are. I feel like the face value isn't crazy from what I've seen, and obviously if Notre Dame draws a whatever in Alabama or something like that, maybe that would change. But I'm just so glad we're getting these on campus. I love it, and I want them to put the quarterfinals on campus as well. I want that tweak to happen.
Kevin,
down the road.
The only drawback to this, and I do feel bad for, and a big part of the Big Ten championship game in terms of ticket avail is the fact that Ohio State's not in it. And I think Ohio State, it was such a foregone conclusion that I think there are Ohio State fans that bought a bunch of tickets and then all of a sudden they're not in it. And that's why they're readily available on the secondary market. But a lot of these conference championship games now, I hate to say this, have kind of become irrelevant, right? Because I mean, if you're an Alabama fan, well, I guess for maybe Alabama's not in it, but, Clemson's a good example. If you're a Clemson fan, are you really going to go pay down to go to Charlotte to watch them play SMU, knowing that if they were to win that, they're going to go into the college football playoff, and instead you could go watch them with a chance to play for a national – you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would say that I think there's still relevancy. Obviously, Clemson, SMU. I mean, for Clemson, they're playing to keep their season alive.
Well, I know, but I'm saying, but if they win, their season does still stay alive. So if you had to pick, you know what I mean?
Right. I think the tough thing is what your fan base is weighing right now. Like Oregon, for example.
Yeah.
So if you look at Oregon's current path, they don't get a home game as the 1 seed. They immediately go to neutral field. So their path would be Pasadena, I believe Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, and Atlanta for the national title. Well, I mean, add that up right now from a flight standpoint from Eugene. Are they really going to hop on a plane to come out to Indy? And trust me, I would obviously love for that place to be full and, tons of Oregon fans to literally flock here. But you got to weigh that with 3 neutral site games. And in years past, you obviously only had, 2 of them in the 4-team playoff. And, maybe if you're, again, one of these teams that's close to some of these bowl sites, it's a little bit easier to get to. I think some of these conference commissioners and ADs, they're going to need to discuss that of how do we make sure that our championship game still has a ton of relevance, which I still think there is some, but also fan intrigue of wanting to come here, because I just don't think even a Penn State fan, if you believe your team's going to win a couple games, you could be traveling a good amount. So I think it's a real question for a lot of these conferences.
It does. I'm going to be out of town tomorrow, and it makes me a little sad that I'm going to be out of town when the Duck is here. But I met him in West Lafayette, so that's cool. So
yeah, it's a great mascot game because I think the Penn State mascot is underrated as well.
Yeah, but he wears cleats, doesn't he? Isn't he a lion wearing just kicking shoes?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's coming off the edge on third down. Mm-hmm.
That's right. All right, Kevin, enjoy the bye week, and we will talk to you next week. All right.
Sing well tonight. Enjoy it.
All right, we'll do. Kevin Bowen, who you can hear at 7 o'clock on Monday morning, breaking down the weekend of the NFL, but not with the Colts to break down because they are off this weekend. The wake-up call with KB and Andy. On the other side, it is a Good for the Heart, Feel Good Friday from Franciscan Health next. Just a little past 2, halfway through it. You know what that means. It is a Franciscan Good for the Heart Feel Good Friday. And a couple of things about Franciscan Health. First off, we had a wonderful, just a couple of weeks ago, health fair during the Indiana-Ohio State game when that took place, but out at Gugman House Brewing, and it was great. The turnout was fabulous. Our friends at WIBC were there as well, and Franciscan had all kinds of different kiosks set up for men and women to be able to get their cholesterol checked, their blood pressure checked, all kinds of screenings taking place. And it was a fabulous turnout and once again showed the commitment from Franciscan just in bettering health in general. And I first met the folks at Franciscan in from that standpoint during another event that they sponsored for us, our day out at the back nine a year ago or so, and was telling them that, I did feel a responsibility of making sure that people are proactive about their heart health. And they said, yeah, let's, what can we do? And I said, well, how about letting people know about the heart scans that can take place just to be preventative? You heard me talking about it earlier, but I want to mention it again. Franciscan's #1 in Indiana, the #1 heart program for cardiology from Health Grades, #1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery, and they still are offering just $49 the price for a heart scan. Heart scan's very easy. It's not invasive, so they don't go, you don't go under. You go inside of a tube for like 15 seconds and then come back out. But it's very, very simple to do. It is very affordable. You can self-refer. You can pay out of pocket, and you get a free heart health risk assessment with it. If you'd like to get a heart scan for just $49, you can always call Franciscan at 833-238-0688. Listen, I know you're not going to remember 833-238-0688, so I will give you that telephone number again in just a second, as well as the website, which is franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. If you want to grab something to write down with, I will get you all of that here in just a minute or so. But when we do the Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, we've had several great stories that we've told over the course of the year. I go back and I think about our buddy Owen, who lives in Avon, and as a young child had, a lot of challenges, both from a health standpoint and just, neurologically in terms of sensitivity to different issues, and then realized that he loved mascots. And so he created the Avon Oriole mascot, became the mascot for Avon. And in that capacity, not only blossomed socially, but has been invited down to meet the mascot at Florida State and Clemson and other such universities, and is now creating a camp for other kids that want to become a mascot. That story jumps out at me as one of them. We've talked about athletes who've overcome the odds in terms of some sort of an injury or an ailment that they've had to overcome and return to the field or the court or the track, whatever those things may be. We've talked about baseball leagues that were set up for kids that normally would not be able to play Little League Baseball, and how up on the Northeast side each and every Saturday they're able to get together regardless of their age, regardless of their limitation, and be able to enjoy, because that's what sports is all about. And then sometimes we simply tip the cap to those who have gotten to the ultimate level in terms of their respective sport. We talk so much over the course of the school year about different teams and the quest to win and lose and things that go wrong in games, things that go right in games. And I really do believe in the state of Indiana, one of the more underrated sports in terms of the fanaticism for it is, in fact, football. I've always felt that football in Indiana, when I worked at Channel 6, I loved Friday night football because we'd get to go up in the helicopter, and there was nothing like flying and seeing the lights of all the stadiums around central Indiana and Indiana in general and the crowds that would be there. And I know that we talk about Hoosier hysteria, but I think that football in Indiana and the passion for it at the high school level is as good as anywhere. So with that, simply a congratulations on this Feel Good Friday to the teams that have crowned themselves as state champions within their respective classes. And one of the stories that we talked about earlier that makes one of them bittersweet but sweet nonetheless. Congratulations to Adams Central, to New Pal, Brownsburg, Providence, Heritage Hills, all on their respective state championships, and to Decatur Central, Eddie Garrison's Hawks, who went into the game, and there's nothing good for the heart or feel good about the tragedy that did take place with Dennis Sherritt, who is the offensive line coach for Decatur Central. You heard Kyle Neddenriep talking about this. But for Dennis Sherritt, who is coaching and is heading into the pinnacle point for professionally speaking, he and his career, and to suffer the tragedy that he did with the passing unexpectedly of his wife leading up to the state championship game. And oftentimes, I think when you lose a loved one, when you go through that, it's, people always say it's after the service. It's after once the little old ladies that have made the ham sandwiches on the Hawaiian rolls have gone home from church after the reception, and then you go home and things are quiet, that's when it really settles in. And for Dennis and his children, and for those members of the Decatur Central family, that time obviously coincided with everything that goes into winning a football state championship, which is oh so secondary, obviously, in the game of life itself. But the IHSAA has a very difficult job, because the IHSAA, when it comes down to it, and I know that we can talk about the politics of transfers and whether or not players are eligible in transferring from one school to the next, and the IHSAA having to have a uniform rule that at times almost seems cruel or unfair against some kids. But at its core, what the IHSAA stands for is the ability for young people to learn about teamwork and about unity and about family. And at the same time, sometimes coaches have to lean into that as well. And for Dennis to be able to coach, knowing that that's what his wife would have had her blessing for, because coaches' wives or coaches' husbands, oftentimes see the commitment from the coach itself, and they understand everything that goes into that. So for that group of Decatur Central, that football family, to be able to come together for Dennis, that's truly what high school athletics are all about. It's about a community feeling, it's about a unity feeling, and it's about teaming together with people for a common cause. And yeah, there are schools like Crown Point or, Linton Stockton or North Judson that got oh so close, and they didn't reach the ultimate goal of being able to hoist the trophy. But they reached the ultimate goal of making together memories and a familial bond that allows people to lean on one another and carry each other in their darkest of times and celebrating their greatest of times. And it was on display in that dichotomy and that importance of teamwork for Decatur Central in representing why we have high school sports. So congratulations to all of those schools, but also a thank you to all of the stories over the course of the year that allowed kids and coaches to feel a part of something. Eddie, you had made mention, and by the way, this time of day we normally are doing Jimmy's Plays of the Day. Jimmy will be back on Tuesday. You'd made mention to the fact that we should do like a rollout song, right?
Yes.
The song that I love for that, I did forever when I used to do the show with Derek, and I love it because it's guys of a local band, right? And I love being able to support a local band. It's a band that I've seen a gabillion times, become really good buddies with. And
Green Day?
that's right. The Elect, who are just fabulous dudes. Michael, the lead singer, is the best. And they're as good, if you were to ask me. We used to do the rollout song for them. I would play it, and it was called Good Night, and I thought it was perfect. Now, the question is, would that be weird for us to use as a rollout song because we're leaving at 3 as opposed to like 7 p.m.? So here's an example of the song. Okay, let's see. What do you think?
Good song. I don't know. Because we're signing off at 3, like you
that's
say.
the thing, right?
Yeah.
But man, now, that was recorded live for the 50th anniversary celebration of the Slippery Noodle, not the 50th anniversary of the noodle itself, but of the family that previously owned it back in 2013. John is up at the Slippery Noodle next. So if you are out and about and you are wanting to get a cold one, Diet Coke, perfectly sufficient. John will be at the Noodle, and certainly say hi to Marty Bacon, who's the GM over at the Noodle, is the best dude in Indianapolis. And I think the Elect is going to be playing there on New Year's Eve, and I look forward to that. Eddie, in terms of the weekend, your big plans consist of?
So tonight I have Pacers-Bulls, the final game of a 4-game road trip. Last night, Chicago, they defeated San Antonio in San Antonio 139-124. So
Victor Wembanyama was out, right?
I think so, but but I say that because I want to fit this in, Jake. It's a Sega Baba for the Bulls. Tomorrow we're going over to Illinois. Olivia and I, we have a family get-together on her side for like a very early Christmas.
What town?
Mattoon, Illinois.
Is it Mattoon or Mattoon?
Mattoon.
Okay.
And then Saturday, Pacers play, so I'll be producing that game as well. What about you, Jake?
I am going tonight to the Silent Night at Taylor University. I look forward to that. We'll talk about that on Monday, or I'll let you know how it goes. And then tomorrow is our annual trip to Milwaukee. So
Spotted Cow, you owe me.
How many? You need a 6-pack?
Yep. That was from the MLB playoff bet.
Okay, so I have a 6-pack of Spotted Cow for you, and then I've got to bring back some for Joel A. Erickson, I assume, and then probably some cheese curds. I love going up there, though. We're going to go to the Pabst Brewery. We're going to go to Best Place. I look forward to all of it, and it should be a lot of fun. But I am looking forward to tonight just finding out how that's going to be at Silent Night. So we'll let you know how that goes on Monday. You folks have a tremendous weekend. I appreciate you listening to Query and Company. And again, Slippery Noodle, J&V, up next. He will bring you home and get you set for the weekend.
Happy holidays, Jake.
From just south of us. That's right. Happy holidays, Eddie. Thanks for listening to Query and Company.